My grandmother refused to visit me in the hospital, and I was about to give up a part of myself to save her son's life. I stared at my phone that morning, reading her text for the 5th time. I won't be coming. You made your choices. 8 words. That's all it took to break something inside me that the surgery couldn't fix. Let me take you back 6 months before everything shattered. I was 28, working as a kindergarten teacher in Portland, living in a studio apartment with plants I couldn't keep alive and dreams bigger than my paycheck. My life was ordinary in the most beautiful way. Morning coffee at the same corner cafe. Friday nights with my roommate Sarah watching terrible reality TV. Sunday calls with my Uncle David. Uncle David, God, where do I even start? He wasn't just my uncle. He was the person who taught me to ride a bike when my parents were too busy arguing. The one who showed up to every school play, every graduation, every moment that mattered. When my parents divorced and my mom moved to Seattle, leaving me with my dad, David was the one who made sure I didn't fall apart. He was there through everything, my teenage rebellion, my first heartbreak, my father's death 3 years ago. My grandmother Ruth lived with David. She'd moved in after Grandpa passed away, and David took care of her without complaint. He cooked her meals, drove her to appointments, listened to her stories about the old days for the 1000th time. He was patient in a way I aspired to be. Ruth and we had a complicated relationship. She loved me, I think, but in that conditional way some grandmothers do. She didn't approve of my career choice. Teachers don't make any money, sweetheart. She thought I dressed too casually. She made comments about my weight every Thanksgiving. But I loved her anyway because she was family, and because I saw glimpses of warmth beneath the criticism. Then March happened. David collapsed at work. Kidney failure. The doctors said it had been progressing silently for years, something genetic, something inevitable. He needed dialysis immediately, and eventually, a transplant. His name went on a list that was thousands of people long. I watched him deteriorate over weeks. His skin turned gray. He lost 30 pounds. The vibrant man who used to take me hiking and tell terrible jokes became someone who could barely walk to the bathroom. Ruth was distraught, crying constantly, praying to a God she'd stopped believing in decades ago. I got tested without telling anyone. You're a match, Dr. Martinez told me on a Tuesday afternoon in April. Not just compatible, you're an excellent match. This could save his life. My hands trembled as I held the test results. A perfect match. What were the odds? I didn't tell David immediately. I needed to think, to process what this meant. Donating a kidney wasn't like donating blood. It was major surgery. Recovery time. Risks. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw David teaching 7-year-old me to tie my shoes, his patient smile when I got frustrated. The choice wasn't really a choice at all. I told him that weekend. We were sitting in his hospital room. He was there for another round of dialysis, and I just blurted it out. I'm a match. I want to do this, he cried. This 52-year-old man who'd been my rock, who never showed weakness, sobbed into his hands. Emily, no. I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking. I'm offering. Your whole life is ahead of you. What if something happens? What if you need it someday? What if I need my uncle? I shot back. Because I do. I need you. We argued for an hour. He refused. I insisted. Finally, his doctor intervened, explaining that I was young, healthy, and that people lived full lives with one kidney. The surgery was scheduled for June 15th. I was terrified and certain in equal measure. The problem started 2 weeks before the surgery. I'd moved in with David temporarily to help with Ruth and to be close for pre-op appointments. One evening, I overheard Ruth on the phone with her sister, my great-aunt Linda. I just don't understand why he won't consider Linda's daughter, Ruth was saying. Jessica is family too. She's offered. My stomach dropped. Emily is too young for this, Ruth continued. She's being reckless. David should wait for a proper donor, someone from the list, or accept Jessica's offer. I stood frozen in the hallway. Jessica was my second cousin. Someone I'd met maybe 5 times in my life. She'd offered? Why hadn't anyone told me? That night at dinner, I asked David about it. He sighed, looking exhausted. Jessica did reach out. She's not as good a match as you, Emily. Her blood type is compatible, but there are other factors. You're nearly perfect. With her, there'd be more risks, more complications. Does Grandma know that? I've tried to explain it to her. She has her own ideas about things. That was putting it mildly. Over the next week, Ruth's attitude toward me shifted from cool to cold. She stopped making eye contact. When I cooked dinner, she barely touched it. She'd leave rooms when I entered them. One afternoon, I found her crying in the living room, clutching a photo of David as a child. "Grandma, what's wrong?" She looked up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "You're taking advantage of him." "What?" "David feels obligated to accept your kidney because of your father. Because he wasn't there when you were growing up. You're using his guilt." The accusation hit me like a slap. "That's not true. I'm doing this because I love him." "You're 28 years old," she said, her voice sharp despite the tears. "You haven't lived. You don't know what you're giving up. And when you regret it, when something goes wrong, you'll blame him. You'll destroy him with your resentment." "I would never. Everyone thinks they'll be different," she interrupted. "Everyone thinks their love is enough. But sacrifice breeds resentment, Emily. I've lived long enough to know." I tried to reason with her, to explain that I'd made this choice freely, that I understood the risks. But she wouldn't hear it. In her mind, I was either a naive child or a manipulative one. Neither version was someone she could respect. The tension in the house became unbearable. David was caught in the middle, stressed about the surgery and about the war between his mother and his niece. I tried to stay out of Ruth's way, but every encounter was loaded with her disapproval. 3 days before the surgery, I was admitted to the hospital for final preparations. Standard procedure, they said. Blood work, imaging, meetings with the surgical team. David was in a room 2 floors above me, going through his own prep. The plan was to do the surgery simultaneously, remove my kidney and transplant it immediately. I texted Ruth that evening. "In the hospital for pre-op. Room 412 if you want to visit." Her response came an hour later. "I won't be coming. You made your choices." I read those words over and over. Sarah, who'd come to stay with me, saw my face and grabbed my phone. "What the hell?" she said. "Is she serious?" I couldn't speak. I just nodded. That's cruel." "You're literally saving her son's life. She doesn't see it that way. Then she's delusional." Maybe she was. Or maybe she saw something I couldn't. Maybe she understood that families are complicated, that love and duty get tangled, that sometimes the person saving you is the one you hurt the most. The night before surgery, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Ruth, about David, about the life I'd have after this. Would I regret it? Would she ever forgive me for something she saw as a mistake? At 2 a.m., a nurse came to take more blood. As she worked, I asked, "Do you ever see donors regret it?" She looked at me thoughtfully. "Sometimes. But usually not for the reasons you'd think. They don't regret giving. They regret when the person they gave to doesn't appreciate it, or when family dynamics make the gift feel like a burden instead of an act of love. What do you do then? You remember why you did it in the first place. And you let go of expectations." They wheeled me into the operating room at 7 in the morning. The surgical team was cheerful, cracking jokes to ease my nerves. Dr. Martinez squeezed my hand. "You're doing an amazing thing, Emily." I wanted to feel amazing. Instead, I felt alone. The anesthesia pulled me under, and my last conscious thought was of David's face when I told him I was a match. The pure, overwhelming relief. That was why I was here. Not for gratitude, not for recognition, for that moment of hope in his eyes. I woke up hours later in recovery, groggy and aching. Sarah was there, and David's doctor came by to tell me the transplant was successful. David's body had accepted the kidney immediately. His numbers were already improving. "He's asking for you," the doctor said. "But you need to rest first." I slept. When I woke again, it was evening. Sarah had gone home to shower. I was alone with my thoughts and the dull throb in my side. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Linda. I need you to know something about your grandmother. Call me when you can." I called her back immediately, my heart pounding. Emily, Linda said, her voice gentle. I debated whether to tell you this, but I think you deserve to know why Ruth is acting this way. Okay. 40 years ago, Ruth donated her kidney to her brother, my father. He needed it desperately, just like David does now. She was young, healthy, just like you. She didn't hesitate. I sat up too quickly, wincing at the pain. What? I never knew that. Most people don't, because 5 years after the transplant, my father died, not from kidney failure, from cancer. Something completely unrelated. But Ruth... she fell apart. She felt like she'd given up part of herself for nothing. She battled depression, had complications from the surgery that left her with chronic pain. She's never been the same. My mind reeled. Why didn't she tell me? Because she's terrified history is repeating itself. She sees you making the same sacrifice she did, and she can't bear to watch it. When she looks at you, she sees herself at 28 hopeful, certain, willing to give anything. She knows how that story ended for her, and she's trying to protect you the only way she knows how. By pushing me away? By not being there to watch you go through what she went through. It's not rational, Emily. It's trauma. After we hung up, I lay in the dark for a long time. Everything shifted. Ruth wasn't cruel, she was scared. She wasn't ungrateful, she was reliving her own nightmare. Her coldness was a shield, her absence a form of self-preservation. I cried then, deep sobs that made my incision ache. I cried for Ruth, for the pain she'd carried alone for 4 decades. I cried for myself, for wanting her approval and understanding why I couldn't have it. I cried for the complexity of families, for the way love and fear become indistinguishable. David came to see me the next morning in a wheelchair, looking better than he had in months. His color was returning. His eyes were clear. You saved my life, he said, reaching for my hand. I know. Mom told me everything last night. About Uncle Frank, about her kidney, all of it. I never knew the whole story. Neither did I. She wants to see you. She's terrified, but she wants to try. Ruth came that afternoon. She stood in the doorway of my hospital room for a long moment, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her. Fragile. I was wrong, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Not about the risks. Those are real. But about why you did this. I thought you didn't understand what you were giving up, but you understood perfectly, didn't you? I did. I couldn't watch it happen again. I couldn't be there for the surgery because 40 years ago I woke up from mine and felt like I'd lost part of my soul. I thought I was protecting you by staying away, but I was just being a coward. She sat down next to my bed, tears streaming down her face. When Frank died, I felt cheated. I'd given him 5 more years, but it didn't feel like enough. I was angry at him for dying, angry at myself for not being able to save him, angry at the world for making me choose. I've carried that anger my whole life, and I let it poison this beautiful thing you did for David. I took her hand. You didn't poison anything, Grandma. You were trying to protect me from your pain. I understand that now. Do you regret it? The surgery? I thought about it honestly. The pain, the recovery ahead, the risk I'd taken. And I thought about David's face, about the years he'd have now to live, to laugh, to be the uncle who showed up. No, I said. I don't regret it. I might someday, I can't predict the future. But right now, in this moment, I'd do it again. Ruth squeezed my hand. You're braver than I ever was. I'm not brave. I'm just loving someone the only way I know how. 3 months later, I'm home in my studio apartment with my dying plants and my quiet life. The scar on my side is healing, a thin line that reminds me every day of what I chose. David is thriving. He's gained back the weight, returned to work, started planning a trip to Europe he'd always dreamed about. He calls me every Sunday. Sometimes just to talk about nothing. Sometimes to tell me he loves me in ways he couldn't before. Ruth and I talk now too, really talk. She tells me stories about her brother, about the version of herself that existed before pain and regret changed her. She's seeing a therapist, working through decades of unprocessed grief. She's trying. I've learned that sacrifice isn't simple. It's not noble or pure or automatically right. It's messy and complicated, and sometimes the people you save can't thank you because they're too busy drowning in their own stories. That's okay. That's human. Would I do it again? Yes. But I'd do it knowing what I know now, that giving part of yourself doesn't guarantee gratitude, doesn't erase complications, doesn't make everything perfect. You do it anyway, not because you're sure of the outcome, but because love is always a risk worth taking. My grandmother taught me that even in her absence, especially in her absence, some gifts are given in silence. Some love is expressed through scars. And sometimes, the person who refuses to visit you in the hospital is the one who understands the weight of your choice better than anyone else in the world. I carry one kidney now, and 2 stories of women who gave part of themselves away. Mine is still being written. But I know how I want it to end, not with resentment or regret, but with the quiet certainty that I loved as deeply as I knew how. That's enough. That has to be enough. And on the days when it doesn't feel like enough, I remember my grandmother refused to visit me in the hospital because she'd been there herself, in that same bed, feeling that same fear. She stayed away not because she didn't care, but because she cared too much to watch history repeat itself. In the end, that's its own kind of love. Complicated, painful, but real. Just like the kidney I gave, and the life it saved, and the family we're all still learning to be.